When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World off. K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast, a podcast about the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Prepare yourself to step behind the ropes and leave the official tour of the story of the popes and Christianity. I am your host, Steve Guerra, and I thank you for joining me on this journey. The apocalypse always seems to be shaded in evil, but what is the background in the text, history, and the tradition about evil and Satan? We'll fumble around and maybe even play with fire.
Ooh, sounds spooky. I'm looking forward to hearing it. Oh, I'll be in it. Oh.
And evil, where evil comes from, that's something that really isn't explained very well in older Judaism, or even in really Greco-Roman paganism. It's the Persians who have a really concrete reason why there's evil.
Yes, they came up with a dualistic idea, didn't they? In the Old Testament, evil, in effect, comes from God. And the author of Jubilees found that a profoundly disquieting idea. And I suppose during the entire Hellenistic period, it was considered to be, well, how can God possibly let these things happen? So they came up with the idea of Satan, who is barely mentioned in the Old Testament. And in the Old Testament, Satan is simply the prosecuting attorney. He's not evil in any sense at all. In the Book of Jubilees, is the first to construct a complex character, which it calls Mastema, who is clearly Satan and the source of all evil.
Before we move on, this whole idea of the angels like Satan, who's a fallen angel, and the Watchers, it's such a bizarre concept that we don't really talk that much about. These Watchers are angels who were sent to teach men, but they fell into sin, and then they had relations with humans and made the giants. Like, how do they explain all this? Where are the giants now? And, what happened to them? Were they actual giants?
It's a weird thing, isn't it? I mean, giants are mentioned in the early parts of Genesis in a couple of throwaway lines. They're referred to as the Nephilim. I don't know how they got into Genesis, but they're just a few paragraphs. But those few paragraphs or verses became incredibly influential. And people were asking exactly those questions. Well, who are these giants? Who are the Nephilim? Yeah, what happened to them? And they expanded into a whole major theology, whereby both in First Enoch and in Jubilees, the concept that angels mated with men and produced, I suppose, hideous hybrids becomes quite a common concept. Actually, it's a lot like Tolkien, as a sideline, because I think in Tolkien, the orcs are hideously degenerate elves or something, or the product of some...
Yeah, I think that sounds familiar.
Yeah, the product of some hideous mismating.
Yeah, and it just seems like this whole thing, to me, it seems like they're trying to explain maybe folk beliefs or holdovers from maybe a type of paganism, maybe that they're trying to explain away.
I think you're quite right there. From my understanding, demons were quite a common concept in Canaan and the surrounding areas. And from what I remember, demons appear quite a lot in, say, Babylonian and Assyrian mythology.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept of these sort of sub-beings who do bad things was certainly around. But Old Testament Judaism had pretty much rejected that concept completely. As far as I know, there's only one demon referred to in the entire Old Testament, and that's Azazel. And he only gets, again, it's just one little throwaway line. But ancient Judaism rejected demons completely. And in fact, it's one of the major distinctions between Judaism and all the other Canaanite religions. They rejected demons in favor of this very rigid monotheistic concept. There is a God. Maybe God has messengers, which ended up as the word angels. But even then, they're a bit sort of, not sure about this. The Book of Jubilees is full of angels. And in fact, an angel called the Angel of the Presence is the angel who dictates the Book of Jubilees to Moses. And it constructs whole hierarchies of them. It doesn't name angels, so there's no sort of Gabriel or Michael named, but they are described by rank. So, like the cherubim, seraphim, and principalities and thrones, which the medievals came up with. They're all in Jubilees. The only angel in Jubilees who gets his own name is Mastema, also known as Satan. So it's interesting to me that Old Testament Judaism had rigidly rejected angels and demons and all that sort of stuff, but they crept back in. Maybe it's a psychological need. And also, I suppose, as you said, influence from Persian religions. I mean, everyone else believed in demons and angelic beings, so.
And the difference between folk religion, what people are actually practicing and believing, and what's coming down from the temple scribes.
That's true. That's very true, actually. I mean, the Old Testament is replete with the temple establishment trying to swat out all the little local shrines where quite probably, these demons were at least catered to, if not worshipped. So to be like, I suppose, modern folk beliefs, a lot of churches have difficulty getting rid of, weird superstitions and say, no, we don't actually believe that, right? It's just a story. One thing about Jubilees, which again distinguishes it from Genesis, is that Jubilees sticks in a lot of legal stuff, halakha, elaboration on biblical laws and rules, which doesn't appear in the Pentateuch. For example, when it's talking about Abraham, Jubilees 21, Abraham is talking to Ishmael, and Abraham decides to give a little lecture about women. And he says, "And if any woman or maid commit fornication amongst you, burn her with fire, and let them not commit fornication with her after their eyes and their heart." You just don't find that sort of stuff in Genesis. There are no legal rules embedded in Genesis. It's a big, happy narrative. And probably the insertion of all these rules into Jubilees is why Jubilees was eventually rejected by the Christians. Even though a lot of the church fathers thought it contained predictions of Jesus, they just couldn't really stomach all this Jewish legal stuff. They just thought, no, we can't really do that. So we'll have to get rid of that book. Sorry, guys.
At that point, was Judaism beginning to develop that concept of the law of other books that are an interpretation of what was said in the Pentateuch or Leviticus, etc.?
Well, there are lots of laws in the Pentateuch, but they're in Deuteronomy and Leviticus. So the laws are there, but they certainly weren't in Genesis or Exodus for that matter, really, except for the Passover. So the insertion of all these laws into Jubilee's retelling of Genesis is a novelty. And the Christians just threw it out.
And I would have to imagine that Christians at the time who are trying to convert pagans and Gentiles wouldn't necessarily like the theme that the whole universe is for Jews only.
No, that would not have gone down well at all.
That's tough to explain.
Yes, you'd have to do a lot of twisty-turny theological interpretation for that one. Not, of course, that stopped other concepts. So maybe if someone had thought really, really hard about it, they could have done it, but maybe it was just too hard. And I thought, nope, it's too clear. It says that the universe was created for Jews alone. No, we can't work our way around this one.
And then the whole idea of this lunar versus solar calendar, is there any evidence in there? They must have had pretty sophisticated methods for observing.
I suppose someone worked out that the solar year was around 360 days or whatever. Jubilees decided it was 364 days in the solar year because that's the only way you can get a nice even number and have 7 times 52, exactly 52 weeks in the year. I'm not quite sure if they absolutely knew that the solar year was 365 and a quarter days long, or they thought, yes, it really is 364 days long. But it was certainly known.
I think the Mesopotamians or one of those civilizations had a pretty accurate solar calendar.
Hey, Steve here. If you're enjoying the History of the Papacy podcast, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/History of the Papacy. We're working toward going completely listener funded, which means no more ads ever. When you join, you get early access to episodes, monthly book giveaways, and most importantly, your name is added to the History of the Papacy Diptychs, our own list of commemorated supporters. You can become an Antioch level supporter for just $3 per month, but it makes a huge difference to making the History of the Papacy ad-free and independent. Nobody likes ads, not you, not me, and I'm the guy who records them. So let's just get rid of them. Visit patreon.com/History of the Papacy and join today.
When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World
I
off.
praise the mountains.
K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
AI can help you write, research, and solve problems faster than ever before. But there is a problem. Most AI is built on a worldview that does not reflect biblical truth. That's why Dominion Chat exists. Dominion brings the power of AI under the lordship of Christ. All the benefits of modern AI built on a biblical worldview foundation. Your work matters, but so does your soul. Sign up today at dominion.chat.
Yeah, that could well be. And the Greeks may have come up with one too. Well, I don't know that much about ancient calendars. There certainly were a lot around. The lunar calendar, of course, is simply the worst if you want to keep track of things, and you have to keep inserting extra months or weeks or days. Just a mess.
And even the solar calendar, if you don't have it worked out to that pretty close to 365 and a quarter, that gets messed up pretty quickly.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if you adopted Jubilee's calendar 364, well, that's a whole day and a quarter. You're losing a year. So after a century or so, things are going to get pretty out of whack. Actually, I wonder how the author of Jubilees would have coped with that, because he thought he was constructing the perfect calendar.
And after a full Jubilee, 49 or 50 years, you're talking that it's close to 75 days.
Yeah, it's out of whack.
Out of whack. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. I don't think Jubilees copes with that at all. He just assumes that the year is 364 days long. Oh, it would have so upset him. He would have been absolutely panic-stricken, I think, if he thought that, because he's come up with this perfect theological concept of 364 days. And then if he actually survived his own calendar and lived into old age, he'd be going, it's meant to be winter now.
Yeah, and my calendar's 2.5 months off.
That's right. Okay, guys, I know that we're having the Harvest Festival in the coldest time of the year when we don't have a harvest, but yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. It really does. It seems to be that they were trying to find the perfect theological year and ignoring that the fact that I'm pretty sure by that point, other civilizations had pretty good solar calendars that didn't fit into exactly 52 7-day weeks.
No, I suppose the Jews are the ones which had the 7-day week, didn't they? So if you're going to come up with a perfect solar Jewish calendar, you have to take into account this 7-day thing. Apparently, that's one of the inspirations for the solar calendar and Jubilees. The fact that the Sabbath falls on the Sabbath every single time over the course of a week. It never moves, to Monday or Tuesday or something. And he wanted to do that for every single other religious date in the year. Hey, if the Sabbath occurs regularly every 7 days, well, shouldn't everything else occur regularly? That seems to be the motivation behind it.
And as we see with the dating of Easter, that's just not an easy thing to dictate. Well, it's an impossible thing to dictate.
And under the current system, yes.
And we've come to the end with apocalypses, but a couple of things we can wrap up with apocalypses is this whole idea of evil and evil being defined and evil being personified starts to come out of this.
Yes, we see this really for the first time in Jubilees. Not so much in Enoch. First Enoch is full of angels, but it doesn't really have a master evil genius. Jubilees is the book which creates the world's first supervillain, Satan, known as Mastema, at the head of the anti-angels, demons, I suppose, the devils. This is the first time we see this concept come through. And it percolated through all Judaism very slowly. It was eventually rejected centuries later. But certainly in the period we're talking about, from Maccabean, Hellenistic to early Christian times, most people would have believed in an active evil presence in the world, which, as you said, I suppose its ultimate origin is probably Persian dualism.
Yeah, it really is. It's trying to fit those two concepts together, that God is the ultimate authority. But how do you explain that this evil is out there? You can't go the full dualism route, saying that there's a counterbalance. There's light and dark, good and evil, and they balance each other out. You can't say that, or that negates the whole idea of a transcendent monotheistic God.
Yes. Basically, Jubilees inserts Satan into all the tough to explain and unpleasant incidents in the Bible. For example, when Abraham is about to sacrifice Isaac in the Old Testament, of course, it is God who has said, go and kill your own son, and then rescues Isaac at the last minute. The author of Jubilees says, no, that's impossible. How could God have, tried to do that? So he inserts Satan into that incident and says it was Satan making Abraham sacrifice Isaac. Or another example, there's a very strange incident in Exodus chapter 4 where God tries to kill Moses. Absolutely inexplicable. It's just a little paragraph, a couple of verses where God tries to kill Moses. No one's ever really been able to explain it. What on earth is going on? But the author of Jubilees explains it. He says, this is Satan actually trying to kill Moses. So the author of Jubilees creates this figure to explain all the nasty little things throughout the Old Testament, which are very hard to stomach, I suppose, if you believe in an all-knowing, beneficent, good God. But when you have Satan doing all these things, easy solution.
And then it gets even more complicated to explain when in the gospel narratives that God's tempting, or that the devil's tempting Jesus. If Jesus is fully God, how is he possibly really get tempted?
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
And there's different explanations to that, in future episodes we'll be able to we'll talk about further. But that's a big one that I think that's an instant one that makes you think that how can there be temptation like that when, in fact, how could God actually be tempted?
Yes, he should be utterly untemptable. Well, I suppose that's the human divinity fusion thing happening. But actually, that incident would have fitted perfectly into Jubilees. That's how Jubilees would have written it, as Satan tempting Jesus. That comes straight from the tradition, the literary tradition exemplified by Jubilees.
And that, to me, just in all these episodes and how, talking about this, for reading about it and then talking about it for several hours, that these books that, even though they really truly are apocrypha, they're hidden, and that they've dropped all sorts of little seeds all throughout the history of Christianity and Judaism that are sprouting up, but we don't really necessarily know where they came from. And a good example of that is actually in the New Testament itself, where those sections that we were talking about Jesus being tempted by an evil force, or traditionally believed Satan, there's no, like, even as a literary concept, the person doing the tempting in those passages in Mark, etc., that character is not even introduced. You get the feeling that the character of the evil one, or Satan, or whatever you want to call it, it's just assumed that the reader knows where that character is coming from.
Yes, there's no origin story in the New Testament, is there? But in fact, Satan would have been a common concept at the time, just like he is now. You don't have to explain him. Everyone knows, even vaguely about Satan, although maybe a lot of people just thought he was the bogeyman or something like that.
Yeah, but it says a lot that it's just in the narrative sense that it was felt that he needed no explanation, whereas the background story of John the Baptist was detailed pretty closely. Look at the background story of Jesus. They go through the 49 generations back to Abraham. So they felt that they needed to settle that up, but not that. The issue of Satan, that to me says a lot.
That's a very good point. Yes, they had to set up this whole origin story for Jesus, explain all these sort of things. So obviously the writers of the Gospels felt, here is something our audience may not know. Whereas, Satan, well, everyone knows that. We don't have to explain it.
Yeah, when it boils down to it, those really aren't their narratives meant to share with other people. Now, to me, it seems like as it went back down to Romans, who maybe Romans and Greeks who didn't have that concept necessarily, that must have been a confusing point for them.
Actually, that's a good point. The pagans didn't have a concept of an all-powerful evil character, did they? All their gods were bastards.
Yeah, like if you take Hades or Pluto, he was a bastard, like you said. Yeah, I just think it's very interesting that this whole concept of evil, and it really doesn't play out in rabbinical Judaism at any level as it does in Christianity.
Yes, not at any level. Judaism reverted to a very strict monotheism, got rid of all the demons, got rid of evil as a personification. On the other hand, Christianity embraced them.
Revelation is a strange and intriguing text where you read it and it doesn't make sense. Oh, yeah. Then you read it again and it really doesn't make sense. You read some commentary about it and it makes a little sense, but not really. Hopefully we can make some sense about it, but then again, maybe not.
Oy, 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 oy.
And we'll hope you listen to it next time as we make some sense or not when we talk about Revelation.
When the world is just too much, turn it off and turn on positive, encouraging K-Love.
I'm gonna praise.
World off. K-Love on.
K-Love is sunshine for my soul.
I love K-Love.
Listen now on your radio, online, or on the free K-Love app.
K-Love makes me feel so good.
Positive, encouraging K-Love.
AI can help you write, research, and solve problems faster than ever before. But there is a problem. Most AI is built on a worldview that does not reflect biblical truth. That's why Dominion Chat exists. Dominion brings the power of AI under the lordship of Christ. All the benefits of modern AI built on a biblical worldview foundation. Your work matters, but so does your soul. Sign up today at dominion.chat.